Fighting off people with a sword, rummaging through bins to try and find candidate leads, finding the letter C written on candidates' cards by someone else. Hi, I'm Okilazu, and welcome back to Race to the Top. In today's episode, I talk to Raj Tulisiani. Raj and I discuss all of these stories, plus we delve into the idea that just because you have a protected characteristic doesn't mean you're interested in DEI or diversity, and why our ideas of allyship are broken. Please do like and subscribe wherever you're listening to this. It really does help to grow the show. Having spoken to Raj, I feel enlightened, and I hope through listening to this, you do too. Enjoy. Hi everyone, welcome back to Race to the Top with me, Okilazu. I'm thrilled today to be joined in the studio by Raj Tulsiani. Hello Raj. Look, I'm going to tell everyone a little bit about what you've achieved, but I got the bio the other day. It was so long, I've had to condense it down. So, I'm sure it's all correct. But if I've missed out anything that you really feel is something that you want to talk about, just let me know, all right? So, Raj is CEO of Green Park. Raj is one of the UK's leading figures in executive and interim search, workforce planning and diversification. He's got over 20 years experience moving the dial on leadership, talent and diversity, and is the author of Diversity and Inclusion for Leaders, Making the Difference with the Diversity Headhunter, which I presume you.
That's me.
Okay, good. Originally it was a challenger brand. Raj has led Green Park to become an award-winning talent agency, and it's featured in the Financial Times list of 1,000 fastest growing companies and Sunday Times Virgin Fast Track 100. Congratulations. In addition to that, in 2020, Raj co-founded Race Equality Matters, which is a community interest company, which is on a mission to tackle racial equality in the workplace through collaborative, impact-driven solutions. This included the launch of the UK's first Race Equality Week, which is now pretty much a staple annual movement, uniting thousands of organisations and individuals to practically address the barriers to achieving racial equality. Before co-founding Green Park, Raj was the first ethnic minority manager at Michael Page. And basically, Raj is a passionate advocate of the power of diversity as a source of competitive advantage and has helped set the benchmark for more inclusive, fair and ethical recruitment practices. Is that all true, Raj?
Yes.
Great. Anything you want to add?
No, but I will say in regards to Michael Page, I was young, I needed the money, and it was last century.
Yeah. I presume Michael Page I haven't seen Michael Page on anything for ages. It's still there, right?
I went to a human capital management firm after there called Penner PLC. So I've been doing this broadly since 1996 with different degrees of sophistication and success.
Well, clearly lots of success, but we're going to get onto that. What I like to do in this podcast is to get people to know the real you. And so I sort of start off with, what was it like for you growing up as a kid in London? I think we're contemporaries in age. Let's not test it, but we are. Tell me about what it was like growing up in London.
Yeah, so I'm dual heritage. My father was Indian. My mother is French.
Okay. Do you speak French?
Very badly.
Un
Petit peu.
peu.
So look, it was a different world back then. You had open racism. I've been hospitalised 3 times in racial attacks.
Wow.
I've had
what sort of age?
Uni and after.
Right.
When I was a kid, we had the National Front attack our shop, try and burn it down when we were in it.
Oh, wow.
I had to fight them off with a sword.
A sword?
Yeah.
Which he just happened to have?
In those days, it was a different world back then.
It was a different world back then.
So I, I was always, I think, aware that difference was not always seen in a positive light.
Yeah.
And for most people, for most ethnic minorities in this country, not all, but for most of them, they do see the 70s and the 80s as a very different environment to what we have now.
Oh, yeah,
and
completely.
Expectations now have changed dramatically, which may be something that we talk about.
Yeah.
But for me, it was It was difficult. I was in a situation where there was alcoholism in my house, there was domestic violence, and all those things to go some way to shape your identity, but also what you feel passionate about.
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah. It was a funny time back then because actually being shouted out in the middle of the street was pretty common, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't these days. With my kids, I think if someone shouts something at them, it's very. I mean, it actually hasn't happened, but it was something that was was common for back in the 80s, right?
Very much so, very common, and loads of people had to run home from school for fear of being attacked, and that's on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So it is difficult without wanting to come across as someone whose reality is totally different. But I think particularly with issues around equality and inclusion and diversity, one of the reasons why we're not getting anywhere is people don't really understand historical context.
Yeah.
So you've got this multi-generational, multi-protected characteristic, really complex environment to develop change. But we're basically saying if I haven't seen it, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And you can't bring people forward like that. You have to have a more nuanced approach to change.
And what did your parents say to you about being different and how that was going to impact your life, or these incidents and what they really meant?
I'm from a business family. So, the focus in my house was really on business. My father had a shop.
Mm.
He made some money. He lost some money.
Yep.
He lost some more money. But he was, he had respect in his community. So for me, what my reality was that, it's not fair.
Yeah.
Don't expect anything to be fair.
Yeah.
I didn't get the whole you have to work 3 times harder to achieve the same thing.
Right.
Because comparing us with other people didn't really work. We didn't know any other people like us. I didn't know anyone else in a mixed relationship.
Yeah, yeah.
Mixed race.
Quite uncommon then, yeah.
Very much so. And I've had Asian people being racist to my mother, and I've had white people being racist to my father, although majority of the time they came off worse because he was a man who stand up for himself.
Oh, yeah. Sounds all you've already said about the sword.
Yeah, it's nothing to be proud of.
No.
As I said, it's the reality of what the world was like.
Hmm.
So for me, I always kind of felt a bit different. I didn't have the language or the intelligence or the experience to be able to articulate that. And I think school in particular was quite tricky for me. I wasn't naturally gifted. I didn't find out I was dyslexic and had another, learning difficulty till I was in my mid-teens. Before that I was just told I was lazy and a bit thick. And after a while you either have a choice of believing it, or you have a choice of thinking everyone else is wrong and you're right. I'm somewhere in between, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Somewhere in between. But my parents never really put any limitations on my ambitions.
Yeah.
They just said, if you want more money, you have to work harder. And if you want to achieve something, you have to know exactly what it is.
So you talked about there's 2 things that I think are really interesting what you talked about. The one thing is about fairness. One of the things that I try to teach my kids straight off the bat is, life can be really unfair, right? The thing you've got to understand is that the fair thing doesn't always happen, right? And you've got to be ready for it, right? And you've got to be able to deal with it. And they're like, well, why is... I'm like, it's just the way it is, right? So there was the fairness thing. And then there was the try harder than someone else. Because I do tell my kids that, right? I do tell my kids, you know what? You just be better. Be as good as you can be. And in a competitive situation, that if you can be better, please be better, because you want to leave nothing to any chance. What do you tell your kids, given what you've now learned and all the rest of it? What do you tell your kids about how they should navigate?
Yeah, I mean, I would say with a degree of certainty, I don't see myself as any form of parent that people should be going, oh, well, that's interesting. Well, Raj said that must be good. And I think my kids would probably agree.
Yeah.
I suppose, what I say to them is what I say to anybody else. You know, you have strengths and weaknesses. You can be one of those people that always focuses on your weaknesses, or you can be one of those people that goes, oh, okay, I need to get everything up to a certain level. Like there's old graphic equalizers. You know, if I'm really balanced, everything will be fine.
That shows your age. I mean, I don't think they have graphical equalizers anymore.
Yeah, they don't. But, you know, I never really worked out what they did apart from the base one anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think for me, you know, what do I tell my kids? I say, like, work out what you're passionate about, you know, realize that it's not a meritocracy, but at the same time, you know, you have to understand the rules of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But often if you play by the same rules as everybody else, you can't achieve anything special or anything that feels like you've really earned it. Because that's what systems do, you know, educational systems, particularly ones you pay for or ones where the teachers are stressed and underpaid.
Yeah.
You know, they are like sausage factories. So, you know, you can take part and try and come out of it the same as everybody else. But if that's what good looks like, then how are you going to be your best authentic self in the future? How are you going to make a difference in a way that means something to you?
Yeah.
So I think independent thinking is something I would encourage in anybody, whether I do a good job of it or not with my own kids. Like, I mean, they seem to be doing okay at the moment.
God, they seem okay.
Yeah, well, as we all do, we see you want to see the best in everybody.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really interesting. Although you always take bits of what your parents what you do say to them is pretty important, you know, and you take bits of what they take forward. I mean, I took the bit about working harder to heart from my parents. Was there anything that sticks with you from yours that you think, actually, I still remember that pretty much all the way through my career?
Or thousands of things.
All
you
right.
know, I'm one of those people that looks back on every day and go, I could have done this differently, I could have done that differently. You know, there's people who turn around and go, wouldn't change a thing. I'm not in that category. You know, I don't have the confidence to do that. So for me, you know, what are the big things that really stick with me? They're all about your own self-worth.
Yeah.
You know, and they're all about what people act in their own self-interest, maybe 80% of the time.
Yeah.
Organizations, businesses, campaigns act in their own self-interest 100% of the time. So if you want to work with others or influence things and you don't understand, you've got no empathy, you know, you're playing darts in the dark. And that's kind of one of the things that shapes my thinking, which is, you know, if you as a person want to affect something that's more than another person, then you have to find some benefit to for those other people to listen and then to act and then to keep acting when the immediate pressure or the immediate benefit is realised. You know, if you want change, it's not about 10 minutes. It's about actually people acting differently because it's in their best interest.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things. I mean, I don't have the words to articulate it, but that's a feeling that I think runs through a lot of how I look at the world now.
All right, that's super interesting. Whilst you're talking, I was thinking about this whole idea of being at school and being different. You know, I was pretty much the only black kid in my year at school, certainly at secondary school, and you can't help but feeling different every day. I mean, you've got the sort of ethnic difference and then the dyslexia, which makes you feel different. You know, what sort of inner spirit did you find to kick through? Because I mean, being different and actually finding school difficult back then is incredibly difficult. What sort of inner strength? What helped you get through that period to then for you to go on and become what you have become?
Well, I don't know define what I have become because I'm on a journey, and when I look at the journey, I think I'm much nearer the beginning than the end. But I was pretty angry.
Right.
You know, I was one of those stuff you, like, you're all wrong, I'm all right.
Yeah.
Even when I wasn't. But that was but I knew I wasn't, you know, and I knew I was like putting on this hat to battle through things.
Mm.
So I think I still got an element of that, really. I'm told I can be quite confrontational. I wouldn't
like to comment either way.
Yeah,
but
do you know what I mean?
probably.
I'm not like, you know, people say truth to power. And they say they've got all these principles, and they're not principles until they cost you something. They're just words.
Yep, true.
So I'm fortunate to have such good people around me that I can do things, and I know lots of organisations, lots of people in organisations who want to do things but won't because they see it as career limiting or dangerous for them. And, I'm not in that situation, so I'm not going to waste my opportunity to influence.
So have you always been like, I mean, we've known each other for a few months now, and it's great, and I like to call you a friend. But one of the things I've noticed is you don't take any prisoners, say, on LinkedIn or anything like that. If someone's talking something you think is basically crap, you shout it out. Have you always been like that?
Yeah.
Right. And how did that work? And that works now because, you're a CEO of a company that's doing well. When you were a kid, a 15-year-old kid or 16-year-old still doing that, how did that work out for you?
Well, I did mention I've been hospitalised and racial attacks 3 times.
It's all starting to make sense.
Yeah, look, I think it is something around unfairness, and I don't think you have to have a difficult upbringing. Lots of people had it harder than me. I don't think you have to be an ethnic minority. I think there's just something in lots of types of humans who rally against unfairness, right? And my way of doing that is to call it out, because I don't like hypocrites. I also think, particularly in the last 10 or 15 years where I've had unbelievable luck meeting real senior people, opinion formers, politicians, blah, 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 all of these people, right? That you don't get much of a chance to talk to them if you've got nothing to say.
Yeah.
And I'd rather speak truth to power, as I see it, in a way that tries to build on some self-interest or make my own principles and values and purpose really clear. And they can choose to buy in or they can choose not to buy in. But at least I haven't wasted the opportunity,
Yeah.
And this to me is an important part of what not only what my firm to do, but what I want to do individually.
Yeah.
Which is I don't want to be one of those guys who gets to the end and goes, "Oh, I could have done this, I should have done that," because that's already in my personality to think I could always do better.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't want to miss that opportunity, and I want to encourage everybody else to speak out, because there's nothing worse than having an opportunity to do something positive for your legacy for 10, 15, 20,000 people that might have that same problem,
Yeah.
And not do it because it's not expedient for you in the moment.
And when you speak out, some people, sometimes even I think about, well, I'm not going to say this, I'm not going to say that, because I might be wrong, whatever right or wrong is. Do you ever think that actually, even though you're vociferous about something, that you might be wrong, or that the other opinion is as valid as yours?
Always. So one of the really challenging things about being portrayed as a leader in a small business or in a community or whatever is that at some stage in your life you work out that everyone's right from their own perspective. Like in Star Wars.
Yeah.
When Obi-Wan goes, well, from a certain perspective, Darth Vader did kill your father. And you're sitting there going, oh, yeah. So I think, you can't be holier than thou. And it doesn't mean you're right about anything.
No.
Or you're right about everything. But if you genuinely feel it, is it better to keep it in? Or is it better to stimulate some form of debate, conversation, feelings in other people so they define what they think?
Yeah.
And that changes and that moves both with circumstance, but also people's stages in life. But for me, I just want to encourage people to speak out and to act, because we have too much amplification of future aspirations and not enough accountability around actions and impact.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's kind of made me think about how your career has panned out, though. So the next question I've got for you is that sort of way of being is very freeing, but doesn't always work in certain circumstances. Certain organisations don't want everyone to speak out and say what they think. That's like career limiting sort of thing. And you've been in recruitment pretty much your whole career. Is that right? It's fair to say.
Yeah, more or less. I did an MBA and I did some work for an entrepreneur, but I started in recruitment in the mid 90s.
Yeah.
So it's been a while.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is. Look, I don't know. Let's be really straightforward. It has been career limiting. It has been career limited.
Yeah.
At Michael Page, they basically said, like, every time I said I wanted to leave, they said, well, here's a bigger job, or and eventually they said, here's a cost code, go and start something up.
All right.
And I started something up for them. It went pretty well.
Yeah.
And then when I said I don't want to do it anymore, I got a bin bag. I was out. I wasn't even there for like 15 minutes. Do you know what I mean? I literally got a bin bag. I said, you've paid for all of that. I don't need any of it.
All right.
So if I had played that differently, or if I'd been easier and less challenging, then maybe it would have been different. In the job after that, there was lots of things where I challenged. In this case, not around some of the things we're going to talk about today, but just around governance and stewardship.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, what do you know about it? I'm like, I can read the papers.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is difficult. It's not a principle until it costs you something. I would definitely be wealthier. So all of those people who are like totally money orientated, this is a different way of looking at it. But also I probably would be less effective because I wouldn't have the same level of commitment to getting to the bottom of things. And sometimes when you get to the bottom of things, you look up and it's like completely different than what you thought it was.
Well, it's always.
But unless you can go 6-7 layers down in questioning, you never really find out what a candidate is really about.
Yeah.
Unless you can really challenge the customer in a way that works, you can never really take their proposition to market with precision, passion, and pace, all three things that they want. But there's plenty of sycophants.
Sycophants.
Yeah, thank you.
Sycophants. I got there.
Yeah.
This is a word quiz game.
That is definitely a assist.
I'll cross it over for you.
Yeah. Sane to mane, but not a buying. So look, that's where I'm at. Do I have regrets? Yeah, of course. But also, on the scales, for me, I feel like I'm doing the right thing for what's important to me. Because I'm not totally driven by money or security or status. I also want to feel that I'm doing something that makes it easier for other people.
Yeah. Oops. No, I think it's true. I mean, obviously, having had quite a big, long corporate career, you kind of you look at times where you think, maybe I shouldn't say that, maybe I shouldn't say that. Keep your head under the parapet, and that's how you navigate. That's how you navigate a corporate career. That is how you do it,
but
right?
Is it any different than school?
No.
Exactly. It's all part of the same system, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's the workers' industrial complex or, I forgot my sociology stuff. But there's definitely this thing that says, look, this is how it works. In school, you keep your head down, you learn, you get your papers, you go to the next place, you get your papers, you go to the better place, you get your papers, you go off to work, you get your papers, you da-da-da-da-da. At the end of the day, you end up on the top of the tree with a carriage clock.
Yes.
It doesn't really work like that. But that is how the system expects us to think.
Want you to work, and I think it's changing a lot. We'll look at the impact of race on that in a minute. So it's really interesting having you here because obviously we want to understand how you've made it, but actually you've got to have you'll have a real perspective on how other people do or don't either, right? So recruitment as an industry, what attracted you to it? And why did you go into it? And what keeps you there?
Well, I'll answer it now.
There's 3 questions in one. I'm good at that.
That's the first thing they teach you at recruitment school. Don't ask multiple questions unless you only want them to answer the last one.
Exactly.
So I was sitting in my dad's shop reading the Evening Standard, basically looking at a career working for him.
Yeah.
And I was a bit like, I don't think that is a good thing for me to do, largely because I don't want to sit in the shop doing sales.
Yeah. What sort of shop was it?
It was like a electronics and fancy goods shop.
Oh, cool.
On Middlesex Street near Petticoat Lane Market.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. and then it became a fashion jewellery shop. Anyway, so,
of which there are many in that space.
Absolutely. You know, we were covering that West African
I
market.
I know. I used to get taken to Petticoat Lane as a kid by my mum, and the thing I used to get frightened about most, probably why I don't like big crowds, is just getting lost because there were so many people
On a Sunday.
You know, it's just madness.
But they've ruined all of our markets now. You know, you've got Spitalfields that sort of exists, Camden that sort of exists. But you've got to remember, before Sunday trading, that was actually a way for working class people to have a side hustle.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
right.
to actually make money and build something for themselves.
Yeah,
But we destroyed that.
yeah.
We destroyed that part of our economy. So I was reading through the Evening Standard, and it basically had this sales job. So I went to see the lady. I called her. She's a great lady, like Joan Collins. And she said...
In what way?
she looked like Joan Collins.
Oh, right, literally. She just
Yeah, she was cool. I won't mention her name because the story changes in a second. So she goes, right, what have you done? So I said, I did this dissertation in my MBA around like why there'd be a shortage of registered general nurses in the future. She goes, that's what I need. So come in here, do the report for our legal clients and tell them, you know, why there's why they can't attract these newly qualified and 2 years post-qualified lawyers. And I'll, give you some money.
All right, cool.
Like, oh, okay, that sounds a bit like a job. So anyway, I came back. I would say when I did this, the office was one room, 6 people, no computers, TGI Friday balloons.
All right, fab.
Yeah.
That sounds like a great office.
On the Strand. Wonderful place. Anyway, so I came back and I said, look, here's the report. Really, the problem is how you're selling it. You're saying it's a fast-track partnership. It's nonsense. You're saying they're getting top dollar. People can see what the Magic Circle firm pays, so that's nonsense. And you're saying, as an American law firm, it's a really progressive place to work when actually you're on like billable seconds. So that's nonsense as well. So you can have my money and leave. And she goes, you can have half your money and a job.
All right.
And I was like, what kind of a job? So 2 things happened. I learned a lot from her. She was brilliant. One day I came in late at night to get my coat, and this immaculate, beautifully presented, immaculate person, right? Never a hair out of place, was on the floor looking like she'd been in the jungle for 10 years. It's like everywhere, just madness.
Yeah.
Glasses like this, everything. And I was like, oh my God, she's not well. What's going on? And she looked at me, and she actually looked through me.
Yeah.
And said, well, if you're ever going to have your own business, this is what you need to know. This is what it's really like. I was speechless. She goes, I've gone across the road and stolen the bins from this recruitment firm, so you've got some leads to chase in the future.
Really?
And I was like, but we get the yellow pages. What do I need leads for? I call people. And then the second thing that happened when I knew it was a day to leave is I came in one Monday, and we didn't have computers, right? We had like cards with our candidates in.
Yeah.
And a big group of my cards had C written on.
C?
C. So I was a bit like, I don't understand. And then by about lunchtime, I'd worked out that all of the non-white candidates had C for coloured written on them.
And who'd done that?
I asked her about that, and she was non-descriptive of who did it. But there were only 5 people in the firm. So,
All right.
Yeah.
And she's one of them and you're one of them?
Well, I was until then. Then I went off and got 14K salary somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, again, it's not principle to cost you something, is it?
No. And one, why were the C written on? To identify people that weren't going to get jobs, or because I'm trying to think about, because this journey leads you to Green Park into doing something different and to represent people of different ethnic minorities and getting progressing and getting work. I'm trying to work out if this is where it started. Were you starting to think, hang on, this isn't a fair playing ground for everybody?
Well, I mean, look, I don't think people should be just given a yes or no because of race.
Yeah.
I certainly don't think people should be given a coloured, on their card, right? It's just nonsense.
No.
So, yes, I felt that was very unfair, so I moved job. But, I think our firm, we measure 19 protected characteristics.
Okay.
Some acquired, some inherited, some associative diversity. The reality is, what our job is, particularly in executive search, which is probably still the biggest part of our business, is to give the client a choice of the usual and unusual suspects. What we've learned since 2006 is you can't attract, retain, or engage people in the same way. So that doesn't mean all black people respond to this one thing and all brown people and all, that's just simplistic nonsense.
Yeah.
Individuals are individuals. But in the world post-2020, where all these firms that haven't even got any ethnic minority partners, doing their tea and biscuits and saying how important race is one week and neurodiversity is the next week and social value is the third week, it has become a battleground for commercial marketing. And I see that in companies. So I just want to work with the people who can benefit from my thinking and my experience and being able to build a bridge into communities of candidates that they can't and bring something back the other way.
Yeah.
Or people who've messed it up. I don't mind. I'd rather work with someone in the bottom quartile who said, look, we think this is why it's important to us. Help us work through that, make this part of our business strategy as opposed to part of our marketing strategy. And that's no different. When we started the company, in fact, just before we started the company, I had this amazing mentor who basically was a big global HRD. And he goes, I'm retiring.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wicked. Can I get your job on? These are the 3 best people in the world. Well, they're all in London, actually, but it was a global HRD job. Probably the first £1 million person I'd ever worked with at that stage. And this is 204, 205.
Yeah.
And he goes, no, I can never give you the job. I'll give you work, no problem, but this job's too big for you. I said, but aren't those the 3 best people? She goes, that would definitely be the shortlist. But I'm going to pay this other firm. And I'm like, why would you pay them 100 grand when you could pay me 50? And he goes, it's going to be about 600 grand I'm going to pay them. So then I completely forgot. And my whole thing was not about money, but why? And he goes, it's about risk. So, but you know them all. You're retiring. They would probably all be interested. 2 of them I know, and I'm not even a big hitter.
Yeah.
And he goes, it's all about risk, Raj. And until you realise that, you will always be chasing. And I'm still chasing. Because, the reality is we too often work in organisation cultures and organisational leadership behaviours that equate decision-making too much with risk and not enough with reward.
Yeah.
Too much with the past, culture fit, and not enough with the future, culture add.
Yeah.
So everyone's saying we're going this direction, this is what we want to be, this is what's important to us, this is what's important to our customers. But then when they make the decision of who gets promoted, who gets a pay rise, who gets hired, et cetera, who gets fired, that isn't a big enough part of the consideration.
Yeah. But so explain. I think it's really interesting, and we'll go to a question I'll ask you about selection in a minute. But this whole element of risk, right? When people are talking about, what do they mean? They risk to whom? To the organisation, to the person who's the organisation as a whole, the person who's hiring for the job, to the people who are working for that people. Explain this concept of risk to me. Yeah.
So the first place, and I'm not going to do a Fight Club thing here, but the first thing here is that there's
the first rule of Fight Club is...
I'm saying. So the first rule of risk is I can't define the risk.
Ah, I see.
Because it's just risky.
Okay.
Maybe when you've gone for one of your non-executive directorships and they've gone, a great candidate, amazing, unicorn CEO, just a bit risky.
Yeah.
And you're like, homie, what do you mean?
Yes.
What is risky about me?
Yes.
And what it is a manifestation of their own individual biases. And in this country, particularly in UK PLC, we still equate an increase in diversity with an increase in risk. And there's really no reason to do so, because if the person is the most appointable candidate on an independent scoring matrix, then the person is the most independently verifiable candidate.
Yeah.
But firms don't do that, because the search firms who influence the vast majority of this stuff are paid on a time and materials basis. So the less time they spend finding people and getting people interested in placing people, the more profit for them, even though the cost for the client might be fixed. So you've got an institutional bias in the very mechanism by which leaders are appointed.
Yeah.
So for me, this idea of risk largely comes down to an idea of affinity bias.
Yeah.
And if you go into it with people, it is a lot around. I mean, I'll give you what I think is a really good example.
Go for it.
Years ago, I was asked by one of my partners to attend a final panel meeting, and it was with a large religious institution, and they had given us a
The
piece.
Church of England.
And they had given us a piece of work, which was basically the largest non-God work they do.
Right.
Right.
Non-God. So nothing to do with religion, but more administration.
The institution.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So basically, we got to 4 candidates: Lord somebody, Sir somebody, and 2 women who didn't have titles. And I said, look, I haven't been involved in this. I don't know anything about it. I can come to the meeting with you. I can, do some prep, but I just cannot imagine why you need me at that thing. She goes, you just have to go. Right. So we went there. I did my prep. There was people from Downing Street. There were people in religious robes. There were people who most, would know, right? They're famous people.
Yeah.
And they talked about the 2 male candidates, fiduciary responsibilities, ability to influence, ambassadorial qualities. And they talked about the 2 female candidates, and it was like a popularity contest. So I sat there going, my fairness button's going off here.
Ding, 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 ding. Your alarm bell's going bang, 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 bang.
When eventually called, I said, look, there's a problem here. You made this about basically a popularity contest with your leadership team, and you made this about the external market and investors. It's just it's very biased. You should utilize the same mechanisms to judge the same candidates. And I mean, to say that the temperature cooled would be a huge understatement, and I think the person from Number 10 actually put their head in their hands. But one of the religious leaders, great man, who was really challenging, the alpha in the room.
Yeah.
He went, that's really unfortunate, but you're absolutely right. And because of that, they made their first a female appointment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And there'd never been a woman in that job before. And she's done a fantastic job because she was a fantastic candidate. She was the strongest candidate. But the reality is that wouldn't have happened unless somebody who was a bit off kilter challenged them.
But you can't, and that's great. And you being in the room made a huge difference. But you can't be in every room, right? And your mindset can't be in every room. And there are rooms all over the country where this sort of thing is happening. Like, how do we move that on?
But that's a nature of systemic change, isn't it?
Correct.
It's not about heroes or villains or good days in the sun. It's about how things actually change. So the first thing is that people have to have an understanding that the talent is out there, but opportunity isn't. I think we're moving towards that.
Is that actually true? I hear that statement all the time, right? And I think opportunity is out there, right? Because talent's out there and opportunity's out there. We've got to make sure that the people who are getting the opportunity get the opportunities, but the opportunities are there, surely.
Do you feel that you get a fair shake of FTSE 100 opportunities?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Well, the opportunities are there. You're saying that the opportunities are there. Do I get a fair tilt at them? It'd be hard for me to say, but I would say possibly not at the moment. And that feels unfair. But the opportunity is there. So we need to change the system so that I get the same fair go at it as everyone else who has the same ability, qualifications and experience that I do.
Yeah, on merit.
Yes, completely.
Right? Yeah. So systemic change, therefore, requires the people who are making or shaping those decisions to recognise that there are people out there who could do just as good a job, and in some circumstances a better job, but might not fit what they think is the best thing straight away. Mm-hmm. So developing those mandates, getting an understanding of where added value is, understanding reward as well as risk of thinking differently about the appointment, that's really important. So you have to have a level of representation. This whole you can't see it if you can't be it thing.
Yeah.
Just psychologically and in reality, it's very important.
Yeah.
Now, about 10 years ago, I tried to put together a black board network. and I couldn't even get people in the same room, right? You had people going,
What people?
ethnic minority leaders,
Yeah.
right? The politics of it was insane.
Didn't ask me.
Yeah, I didn't know you then. And plus, would you have been senior enough then?
Yeah.
Well, my bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Were you on a board then? Were you on a board
Yeah, I
then?
was. What have you learned
Double
on
my
this journey
bad.
as an ace? I must contact Oki 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. Well, when I get into my hot tub time machine, that won't be the first thing I do.
Okay, I bet it won't.
I'm going to go meet Marilyn Monroe. So the point being, right, that some of them said, look, it's a meritocracy. People get up and down, based on their own, expertise. And the vast majority of those people were extroverts or made or counted money.
Mm-hmm.
Then there were people who said, actually, this is all nonsense. It's a meritocracy. I don't want to put my own personal name to it, but I'll help you behind the scenes. And you said, well, why is that? It's a bit career limiting for me. Mm. So you don't get that now. We put together a 10-person ethnic minority-owned SME consortium. We went from this is an idea to do you want to, do you agree these heads of terms? Do you want to come and sit together? We did that in 3 weeks now, right? So that's not saying Green Park's amazing. That's saying the world has moved on. And now when you talk to ethnic minority leaders, particularly in financial services, technology, consumer businesses, they see diversity as part of their personal brand, right? And I'm like, but 7 years ago, 5 years ago, you didn't want anything to do with this. You were like 100%, I'm not the black finance director, I'm the finance director.
Yeah.
But now you're in the list for CFOs, you're making it. So I'm a bit like, that's fine, but do something real.
Yep.
Even if you just change 3 people or mentor 5 people, do something real. Don't just make it an aspiration of future intentions to get yourself personally up there.
But don't you think so, talking from my own personal experience, you spend time just trying to be the best you can be and almost not seeing colour, but just, I need to be better than this person, this person, this person. I just need to be good. And when people try to come and label you, join this black network, you're like, I don't need a label, right? I need to just be really good at being me until you get to a point when you suddenly think, hang on a second, I've done nothing to help anyone else, right? I've just been so focused on me because the battle is so hard. It's so difficult. To kind of break through this thing, you feel selfish, and then when you put the mirror up to those people, it's probably good. You're like, yeah, it's true. I've had that myself. Like, hang on, the reason I'm doing this now is I've realised that I should have been pretty selfish all the way on this journey, and I need to do something different. It sounds like you get that a lot from successful, is kind of or not.
I don't. It's really complicated because interpersonal relationships are complicated, aren't they? I don't think that because someone has got a protected characteristic, they are naturally interested in diversity.
No.
Right? And this is a massive mistake corporates make, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree.
They get someone who's like super interested in women issues and then think, okay, that's a person who should be doing X, Y, and Z, when they don't have the technical competence. And they may have real powerful lived experience, but, just because I used to like playing on an abacus doesn't mean I should be a finance director.
No.
There is a...
Good indicator.
Maybe.
Maybe. We should go back and test it.
So I'll put that one just before Marilyn Monroe, after meeting a young Amita Bachchan, and then that one.
I'm just giving you freebies.
All day long. So for me, this assumption that just because somebody is diverse, they know about diversity or particularly interested in diversity, it doesn't really play out.
No.
But where I get energized is where the person has just added it on and wants to do something or wants to affect change or has, had that kind of come to Damascus moment where they get that their organization would be better if they reduced retention by 20%. And the vast majority of their retention is in these areas, so understanding those communities would make a big difference. So I'm really interested in people who want to take action or people who've now got, for whatever reason, I'm not judgy, a reason to do it, because those are the people who change the world, right? It's not the people who wake up and have been fighting for 20 years like me. It's the people. It's the other 10 million people who are a bit like, yeah, kind of, I just don't know what to do. I've got the will, but I don't have the skill. That's the systemic change.
Yeah. Is
when people start looking at it in a different way, and those people don't necessarily have to have skin in the game. They have to have their own reasons for doing it.
doesn't everyone has skin in the game in a way? Because I was going to talk to you about sort of allyship, mentorship, sponsorship, all of these things, because it's very difficult for the people of colour to make the difference. It's going to be about someone else making the difference. And what's your sort of perspective on the role of, let's just call it allyship now, because I did 3 last time, so let's just stick to allyship.
Yeah, so race equality matters. In that race equality week, last year it was 5 million people, the year before it was 4 million people. So there's a load of people and a load of data that comes to us, both through the events we run, which for monetary reasons are always virtual, and through this group of around 1,800 race network chairs that we help, right? You know, and the most, for me, you might not even blink, but for me, it's almost cold sweat time. We, in all of our focus groups and online events, we ask a question about allyship. And in none of those groups, and all of those groups say like 300 to 650 people attending, voting, etc. Right? In none of those groups was there ever a benchmark that said more than 24% of allies are making a positive impact. So you've got these people who are putting their time in, sometimes putting their energy in, often putting their passion in, self-declaring themselves as allies, and many of them will be doing great things, but people weren't seeing ever more than a quarter of them making a positive difference. So our idea of allyship is broken from both ends. So the allies aren't getting anything, and the people that they're trying to create positive change for are not recognising it.
They're not seeing any change from the role of an ally.
A lot of people think it's a negative role.
Right.
You know, and it's and I don't want to get into the whole kind of René Lodge world of, you know, white privilege and all that kind of stuff, because it's not really my reality. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm just saying I don't think it's going to make a difference because people aren't going to recognize it. But when people in an organization are rejecting or not seeing value in allyship, that is very toxic.
Yes.
Because you can't ally your way out of that.
No,
you can't reverse mentor your way out of that. So you have to fundamentally look at how you balance that equation, and that can't be done internally. You need external thinking. You need different opportunities to create leaders. You need to move away from kind of tokenistic pilot things, and you need to go back to the, you know, these are the reasons why this is important to us. Hold us accountable against this plan. And this plan is not based on what's in the red top newspapers. This plan is based on how we are going to make diversity and inclusion part of our engine for creating a better version of this company. So it's completely integral to the company delivering its promises. And now you're seeing this kind of, and they're using either a proxy like social value or social mobility, or they're using monetary excuses to say, you know, we're not going to spend as much on it. I'm like, you spend too much on it anyway because you're not doing anything positive.
And what is it? I mean, one of the things that I've really noted is that people, when things have labels, whether it's Black Lives Matter or DEI, it's very easy to rail against that and like, well, we don't like Black Lives Matter anymore because they're extremists, and DEI is now being against white males, right? So it's discriminatory in its own existence, right? And I'm like, those things all may well be true, right? But when you work with organisations, don't you just want to have the best organisation? Don't you just want to have the best leadership team, the best people who work in the organisation? Isn't that just what you want? And if you say that to most top leaders, they go, yeah, that's what I want. Then you should do these things. Don't make it about, I mean, I don't know what you think. Don't necessarily give it the label DEI, just make it having the best talent in your organisation. I mean, your career has been about talent and getting the best talent. And I suppose what we're saying is break the boundaries for that. Just get the best people.
Who could argue with that? But where the rubber meets the road isn't in words, it's in actions.
Yeah.
You know? And what organisations are able to deliver on the promises they've already made? And part of that is, I think, very poor external advice. You know, they don't have critical friends, they have sycophants, or they have people who charge them fortunes for stuff that, you know, there's no value. I mean, if you think about the FTSE 100, how many FTSE 100 organisations spend more on employee survey questionnaires than they do on their ERGs?
Yeah.
You know, like, maybe all of them.
Yes, quite possibly.
Right. So, and you can do a survey, engagement survey on SurveyMonkey, right?
Yeah, super easy.
Yeah, you know. So I'm not saying that those things have no value. I'm saying that don't say it's a board level or a real serious brand issue and then fund it in a way that's less than the seventh most important person in accounts.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So, a few other quick questions that you are perfectly equipped to answer. So, selection, but I was listening to something today, and it was about how if your name's Oki Lazu, you're likely to get less job interviews than if your name was John Smith, right? So selection bias. And I was thinking, well, I've got Raj here. I'm going to talk to you about selection bias. Quite clearly exists. You obviously believe it exists. And how do we address this? I mean, you know, there's blind CVs, there's all sorts of stuff. I mean, really, how do you fix this issue?
You fix it job by job by creating a mandate and a process that gives you the best opportunity to attract the most relevant talent for you for each job.
What does that mean?
Okay. So you don't do blind CVs because sooner or later someone's going to go to you, why do you do blind CVs? And you're going to go, and that person's going to go, oh, so why do I have to hide my identity to work here? Because if you have that bias, and you know, there's over 52 types of bias, right?
Yeah.
You know, we talk in this country about 6 of them. You know, if you have that bias, then when will it manifest itself? Will it be at final interview?
Mm-hmm.
Will it be at bonus time? Will it be when there's an economic downturn and you need to cut
Get
costs?
those people, yeah.
So the first thing is you have to have a little bit of nuance. The second thing is, what do I mean by my first comment? It is you have to have enough access to different thinking to shape what will give you an unfair share of the talent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because if you say to any leader, would you like access to the best talent for this role? You know, who's going to turn around and go, nah, I'm really, you know, what I really need here is a third tier person.
No one, right?
No, don't say that, even if it's true. And, you know, sometimes a conversation you have to have with people is, do you want the best or do you want the most appropriate for where you are and what you need? And you may have to upgrade in 3 years. Because the best person is going to cause these waves and, you know, getting them here will mean that as a leader, you've got a bit more disruption to deal with.
Disruption because they're different.
Disruption because they look at it and go, this is a 4. You know, if you want me to be here, it's got to be an 8, right?
Yeah.
So to move from a 4 to an 8, you know, I'm not going to just go at your pace. I'm going to go at the pace that's required for me, because a lot of really senior people, they're a bit like rock stars, right? They're a bit like, you know, Mick Jagger. Wherever they go, they're Mick Jagger. Copacabana,
Yeah.
I'm Mick Jagger.
Yeah.
You know, and they're brilliant.
Right.
Yeah, sexy.
That's
lip.
just terrible. Anyway, carry
It's
on.
good. It's good.
Yeah.
Keep that in. You know? So look, so you have to then accept that is that person's personal brand. That's what they're brilliant at. You know, and in the right circumstance, the yield on those is fantastic.
Yeah.
In the wrong circumstance, or when the role is missold, or when you're so keen to attract the person that you're not really using your internal recruiter or your external recruiter or whoever to get to the next level of insight, you know, you're taking a guess. And then when you're a complex organization or an organization that's slow to change, you know, you're telling somebody that they're on, you know, they've got all power to go and do something, when in actual fact, you may have a really hierarchical or really consensus-driven organization, and that person is not what you need.
Yeah.
The idea of that person is great. You see this in the civil service, don't you?
Yeah.
Or you see this with ethnic minority leaders in financial services. You know, this is exactly what we need. But then there's often a tissue rejection because actually what you've told the person to get them on board around change and pace and, you know, a mandate to really go and make a difference is not what the organization will take. And it's not what it needs, because actually what it needs is a different approach that creates results, but not the same level of ambition as the individual. And this happens all the time. And people then go back to this idea of culture fit.
Yeah.
You know, and actually it's not culture fit. It's that you've allowed people to missell the role because you want to show the quality of your shortlist, the quality of your working, but actually you've not dealt with the real issue, which is what does this business actually need in order to deliver on its promises.
So if I'm a hiring manager listening to this who wants to make a change and make a difference, what's your advice to me?
Well, firstly, no one's stupid. No one sits there like purposely going, I'm going to make it more difficult for me because I love it when my finance director leaves and I need to go and get a new one. Everyone wants to do their own day job, and everyone, I come from a position where everyone comes from a decent motivation, right? So the first thing is to say, look, get back to basics and then be open to some challenge. And I find it amazing that organizations can spend, 50, 100, 200 grand on hiring, on paying a search firm to do pieces of work for them.
There's a lot of people don't realise that that's what happens.
But it's crazy. And then they go like, I got 10 minutes to tell you about it. I'm like, is there no one internally that you can put into this job? Because I can't sell it in 10 minutes and neither can anybody else unless they go to people they've already got relationships with, they put through for lots of jobs. They're like, okay, I know you didn't get that other piece of work, but this is right up your street. Do you want to meet me on the ninth tee or whatever? I don't know. It's not my thing, right?
Yeah, golf's clearly not your thing.
True, right? It's not. It's definitely not.
Meet
my
you on
thing.
the second tee. That never happens.
Yeah. So my point is, it comes back to this idea of bias and familiarity.
Yeah.
And if you want more diversity, you have to do something differently. You can't just use the same people, have the same mindsets, stick to the same processes, have the same assessment, and then magically expect the outputs to be different.
Yeah.
And this is what we've seen when we started that Business Leaders Index in 2014, measuring the gender and ethnicity in the FTSE 100, now 350. People would say, oh, okay, so this has gone up. Ethnic minorities went up, and then it went down to 0 in the top 3 positions, pipeline, etc. But when you look at the people who actually get the roles, particularly as NEDs, there's plenty of people who are multi-hatters, particularly at that stage where we had this fantastic increase in female representation off the back of the Davis Review. That moves really quickly. And Vince Cable actually did a lot to move that on that he didn't get credit for, because he actually walked around and went, well, why haven't you got one?
Yeah.
But we're not one and done with gender in the same way that we're now in danger of being with race. And I think the more we split things up and the less we look at the business outcome, then, there are people lower down in the organisation who then have a checklist. And when you've got a checklist, it drives certain behaviours.
Yeah.
So this is the complexity around attraction, retention, and promotion that people are unwilling to have a discussion about, because there is a way of doing things that's very comfortable. But if everyone's doing the same way and you want a better share of talent, surely it makes sense that you would do it a different way.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So if you take that then and you think, you must meet so many people who, reach this what they perceive to be a glass ceiling, or someone called it to me the other day, a concrete ceiling. Like literally, there is no way I'm breaking through this thing. I need to go do something else. And I know, I think most people have felt like that at some point. What do you advise them? What's your advice to those people who feel like they're topped out? There's not because of their ability, but because of organisational politics, institutional racism, whatever it might be.
So we put around between 200 and 225 people on main boards every year.
Yeah.
Over the last 3 or 4 years, the average of ethnic minority placements have been between 30 and 35%. And gender's always been over 50%. So when I say this, it's not what I think, it's what I've learned, and what the firm has learned. And the people who are able to traverse the highest, in my view, are the people who have the most clarity around what their proposition is. If you are an ethnic minority, that is even more so. And there's lots of different ways that people do this.
Is that a brand or skill?
It's
or
what
both?
It's what works for you.
Right.
Because you can't win playing the game in the same way as somebody else would win. Because at that top of that pyramid, it is extremely competitive.
Yeah.
I remember, I don't think it was last century, but it feels like last century. I was involved in the placement of a new chief executive at Tower Hamlets.
Mm-hmm.
And part of, he said, look, come and do this thing, this talk, right? So I went to do this talk, and it was at that stage, I don't know, the biggest room of people I've ever seen, and they all work for the council. It was hundreds of people. And the talk was on career progression. And I said, how many of you want to be on the board? I mean, they didn't even have a board, right? It's called the ruling council or, the SLT or something. And, literally about 90% of the hands went up. And I went, do you know how many people are on it? Do you know how many execs are on it? Do you know how often they turn over those roles? Do you know what you have to have done to be actually considered for that role? Because if you don't, you are just believing that the world is a meritocracy when the world of work isn't.
Right.
And I think as people progress in their careers, they believe that if they do good work, they will get recognised. And that is, from personal experience, I can tell you, much more prevalent with diverse candidates than it is with white, middle class, well-educated candidates, right? And there's nothing wrong with them.
What you're saying, they know the game. They know the game.
They know the game. And the game, of course, has been the same for a long time. So if I am now trying to get a non-executive role and I'm against people who've got 15 non-executive roles, this, that, and the other, I'm already starting from a position where I'm behind, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of my own protected characteristics,
Yeah.
because it's bloody competitive.
Yeah.
So if I go in and talk about fiduciary duties and, this, that, and the other, I'm not going to be able to score as many points or create as much traction. But if I talk about something like that they don't have, that I do have, which is, well, I understand your customer satisfaction has gone from this to this. Have you thought about digitizing it? Because digital transformation is a critical part of X, Y, and Z. I'm now getting onto a ground where I can win. So this has to be seen as a competitive situation. And I think particularly in ethnic minority communities, when you are, I think that the greatest gift a headhunter can give a client is making everybody appointable.
Mm-hmm.
So if you pick people who clearly aren't and then spend time making them appointable, you wasted everyone's time, particularly the person who gets that you're too risky at the end, which is just nonsense.
Yeah.
The second conversation should be, do you know why they're going to say no? Because most people know why they're going to say no. And then they have all of these meetings and all of these opportunities to influence, but they never address the elephants in the room because they're playing the game by somebody else's rules.
Yeah.
So I think that independent thinking, not just for board roles, but for internal promotions.
Yeah.
It's impossible for us to fundamentally change the ratios of people being promoted and getting much bigger jobs without empowering those people to be more authentic in terms of what their proposition is to that business.
Yeah. And understand the game. It's funny if you say that. I remember when I was quite a senior person at one of my former companies, and I thought, I'm just going to be brilliant at my job and that's going to be enough. And someone else came and he said, okay, you spend all your time here in the regional office doing this amazing stuff. I'm off to head office. I'm like, to do what? He's like, to be there, right? To talk to people and stuff. I'm like, I've got no time to do that. He's like, more fool you. Mm. And he was right? I thought just smashing it out in the regions was enough. When you get to quite a senior level, it's not. It's the different game. It's being seen. But I was like, I don't really want to play that game. Mm. But that's self-limiting. If you don't want to play that game, you're not going to. So you're probably not going to make it. You need to educate people that there's a game that's being played. And if you want to get to the top of it, you need to understand what that game is.
It's a really good example. Okay, and 100% agree with you. You have to understand the rules of the game. You don't have to play it in the same way.
No.
And often we can't.
No.
Because, if you use some very exaggerate for the sense of discussion. If I don't go to a pub and I don't drink alcohol, I do.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Tick, tick.
A bit early for me there, but thank you.
It's...
Then you're not going to be in some of those internal informal networks.
Right.
But you still have to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
You still have to be able to influence. You still have to work out that kind of empathy advantage. And, I think it comes back to this thing, like you have to work 3 times as hard. you have to be smart.
Yes.
You have to compete, and we can't all compete in the same way, regardless of what our backgrounds is.
That's right. You have to work hard and understand what the game is. And you can opt out that game, actually. Lots of people go off and start their own business and stuff,
Yeah.
and I think that's great. What I want to see is more people of colour in senior leadership roles in the UK. And to do that, I think exactly what we've talked about needs to happen. People need to understand where do I fit? How do I fit? How do I make the next step? And that's not just being good at my job.
Yeah.
That isn't on its and in of itself enough for anyone, not just the ethnic minority, anyone. Just that
Yeah.
other people get it quicker. They understand it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's easy to segment by protected characteristic.
Yeah.
You know, and if you look at Black heritage representation in our largest companies, particularly since 2020, it's gone down.
Yeah.
If you look at really senior people, like the pipeline to the top 20 jobs in the company, we have been a net exporter of Black talent. And then when you look at the Black people who are in leadership, probably about 10 to 12% of them are British passport holders. So we're exporting you 10 years ago to smaller organisations or other countries, and then we're importing someone from another part of the world. So what does that say about how we're actually dealing with our own Black talent in this country?
Yeah.
You know, so
It's amazing.
all
Really
of these things can be seen if you have the right data, but sometimes you don't need to spend money to tell you what you know already as a leader.
Yeah.
And most leaders want a better choice of people who can help them deliver what the organisation has promised to.
Yeah, that's good. So, and finally for me on this is going to be, I feel like we've been in a sort of weird negative spiral. Give us some hope, Raj. You've been doing this a long time. You know, I want to make change. You want to make change. Give us some hope. What have we got to be hopeful about?
We've got loads to be hopeful about. I mean, if you look across the diversity spectrum, people are just much more clued up now. You know, the issue we have is that our expectation has been gassed up by organisations going, how important it is to us.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And then every 3 months something happens, there is, you know, a bit more of a trust gap that happens. So we could solve that. We could solve that in 6 months, right? Any organisation can energize and reposition what they're trying to do around DEI in 6 months. They can't fix the problems because a lot of these problems are not just with one side. And we still have this thing that going, if I've got a problem, let me go to the ERG.
Yeah.
But it's leadership's issue.
Yeah.
The ERG can help, as can other people. But many senior people don't want anything to do with the ERG because they don't value it.
Yeah.
So for me, you can create value very quickly. Number one, have a diversity dashboard on a few things that you're going to measure and that you're going to explain to the organisation what you're trying to do and by when.
For example.
So, for example, let's look at Lloyd's of London, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lloyd's of London, Chief Executive Board, Mark Lomas as head of culture. You know, they said, look, we've got this transatlantic slave trade issue. Okay, you know, we were involved in it. It's going to come out. There's no controlling the narrative. Let's get on with it. So they said, look, this is what we've done, right? We hold our hands up. We did these things. They're bloody awful, aren't they? And this is what we're going to do. So they launched the Inclusive Futures Programme. So I believe hundreds of bursaries, lots of work in an investment in a company that does, a Black-owned company that does early stage careers, you know, and some stuff around board work, which we're delighted to be the preferred partner across those 8 members, right? So they're doing something that's real. And even if they don't hire those people, they're actually creating value in those communities to say, actually, you know, you were a 4, you're now an 8.
Yeah.
Go and use that skills as you can. So they've done that. It's real. You know, they've committed for 10 years. So, you know, are you telling me that there aren't organisations in the FTSE 100 that can do what Lloyd's of London can do or can do something better?
Better. But you said something, but create metrics. What metrics? What are they measuring?
So they're measuring representation, they're measuring retention, they're measuring to a certain extent advocacy.
Okay.
So what people think. But what I think they're doing that is super smart is that they are telling people it is a long-term journey with short-term quarterly measurements.
Right.
So, this whole thing, if it doesn't get measured, it doesn't get done. I'm not sure if it's true, but it feels true in corporate life.
That is true.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100% true.
Yeah, it feels true in corporate life, and in these organizations, you get people at the top who want to see change for a variety of different reasons. It doesn't matter what the reasons are. It should be, to a certain extent, different from individual to individual and company to company, because all companies are competitive. And then they go to people who may not have the technical skills, or may just be in HR or D&I and, good people, but they haven't done it before, because in some cases these things haven't been done before.
Yeah.
But then they've got a vested interest in protecting what they've done.
Yeah.
Because, nobody wants to go at right angles from a strategic perspective. So then who do you go to? You go to your big four, you go to your favourite headhunters, you go to people that you've got trust and affinity with. But they haven't done it either. So I don't think there can be anything for us without any involvement from us.
Right.
And that's the same whether it's...
Who's us? Just be clear.
Us is the people with lived experience.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean that because if I was part of the LGBT community, right, I would have my lived experience. It doesn't mean I'm a great change agent for delivering corporate change.
No.
But you have to have some form of co-creation, otherwise you're doing things that don't land, which I think is the kind of fundamental problem with allyship in our UK PLC at the moment, is people are doing things that don't land.
Yeah.
These are clever people. They're not doing stupid things.
With the best of intentions.
Very often with the best of intentions.
So go on. Anything else we should be hopeful? But, I suppose my last question is, can it all, and will it be different in 20 years' time?
Yeah. I mean, it's different than it was 5 years ago. We started off talking about the 70s and 80s and, open racism. You talk to people who've got visible disabilities and ask what it was like for them in terms of facilities 10 years ago. You talk to senior women and ask what it was like 10 years ago. So the progress is there. It's just not as fast as we want, because we're mismanaging expectations, saying that we can create change in a year when we can't.
Yeah.
And I also think the most, the single biggest hope for all of this is that it's coming anyway. The population demographics mean that leaders will be different. The people now opting out of work means that we're going to have to do more with the communities that we have internally. The whole kind of gig economy and people thinking differently about career paths, which no one really understands. We all blame the next generation, but they don't understand it. They haven't even been in work yet.
Oh.
And of course, you've got this demographic explosion where in 10 years, we're going to have 11% less 16 to 21-year-olds.
Yeah.
So all of this points to a world where we have to make more of what we can access talent-wise, because, when we don't have people coming all around the world queuing up to get in, even if they could get in.
Yeah. Let's not even go there. Look, Raj, it's been amazing. I always thought it would be a good conversation. We always have good conversations, just that we've managed to capture this one on tape, if it's tape these days. That's showing my age. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Thanks for your perspectives. Thanks for your honesty. Couldn't have been better. Very pleased.
Thank you very much.